電機と天才トリップ・ホーキンスが世に送り出したマルチプレイヤーだ。
It's a new experience.
それは全く新しい体験。
Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Episode. Today we're going to continue the series of 3D Doesn't Suck, and I'm here to convince you why. And if you can't tell already, today we're taking a look at Escape from Monster Manor. This is one of the earlier games for the 3DO. It was released in 1993, before Doom came out, but after Wolfenstein did. You can definitely tell that this wears the Wolfenstein 3D inspiration on its sleeve. But from start to finish, it's a super competent first-person shooter game for the 3DO that has some of the most creepy soundtrack and ephemeral audio I've ever heard in any game ever. Before you get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined to want to support the channel, we got a Patreon link down below as well. But as soon as you get to Escape from Monster Manor, if you've ever played a first-person shooter game before, you're going to 100% know what the game expects of you. And one of the first things you're going to notice about the game is just how smooth and fluid the frame rate is, and how all the sprites are so well animated and fast within the game in and of itself. And that's the great thing about Escape from Monster Manor. The entire thing runs so well on the 3DO hardware. And don't forget, this was a fixed spec, but if you go over to something like Wolfenstein 3D, when that first came out on DOS, I remember my PC could only get like 20 to 25 frames per second. It was a relatively demanding game, but when you put something like Escape from Monster Manor into your 3DO, you were met with a fast, fluid, responsive, and very entertaining first-person shooter that played a lot like Wolfenstein 3D, and that's definitely nothing to scoff at. And the best part is, compared to fighting the Nazis, you're fighting monsters, zombies, and other horror elements here, and that is actually one of my preferred things to do in gaming. I've loved the horror genre as a whole. The big hook on this game is that you need to collect keys through every single area of the manor in and of itself, and sometimes you find something like this man just hanging from a rope in a corner. It's not an enemy, it's just there for set design, and it was creepy as hell when I first saw it. And I would say as a kid in 1993, this game definitely did creep me out because I was either 9 or 10 years old when it came out. I can't remember now, and it definitely leaned into that horror element. It definitely looks a little bit hokier now in 2024, but when I played this game back in the early 90s, this definitely had that horror vibe going for it, and I still think it does a really good job today. And you're going to see some jump scares every once in a while as well. Definitely a cheap way to scare you back in the 90s, and something the developers still use today. But again, when people say there's nothing to play on the 3DO, that's just not true. Escape from Monster Manor is not a very long game. Once you learn the map layout, you can 100% speedrun this thing very quickly. But when you first start playing the game, within 5 to 10 minutes, you're just going to be hooked. You're going to want to find the exit. You're going to want to see the new level designs. You're just going to want to see the game to its completion, and that means it is a good game. In the 90s, you didn't really get many first-person shooters on home consoles whatsoever. You had something like Wolfenstein 3D on some consoles, but really this was still a genre in and of itself being born on screen, and the developers of this game did a great job making it. So much so that just recently the source code was sent to a museum and it's now available to the public, so if you want to do any mod work on this game, you 100% could. And I love those statues there in the animations as they open their mouth and basically scream at you. It's such a small effect, but it does so much to sell the horror element. And I will say that the first area of the game, the one you just saw, is so much brighter, but once you get to the third level, you're gonna get this crimson blood red area with all of these transparent ghosts coming at you screaming with knives in their hands. The colorway of red here on the walls definitely even makes the horror element more impactful, and I wish that they had just done a little bit more with the color design in the beginning areas of the game to really do that over-the-top blood red horror from the start. But it's such a minor complaint in a game that I absolutely love. All of the character designs, all of the texture work here just create a universe that you really do believe in. And there's some really interesting design as well, how you have your ray gun here and the ammo counter is going to be that red bar. As you shoot, it's going to diminish, so you have a real-time indicator of how much life you have left. And that is just a really nice design feature, and not something you really saw in the 90s because it was probably maybe even invented for this game. But the soundtrack and all of the horror sound effects in this are just so creepy. It really does intensify the horror and really make you want to look over your shoulder wondering where that sound's coming from. So I'm going to give you a 45-second sound sample, but come back because I got a lot more history of the game to tell you about and its relationship to Wolfenstein 3D.
Carefully. Carefully. Carefully.
It's like a classic Italian hammer horror movie soundtrack, but all of the different sound effects and all of the ephemeral audio in there really just go over the top, and I think some of the sound design in this game is the best of its generation. Now, we can't talk about Escape from Monster Manor without talking about the fact that there is no texture on the floor or on the ceiling, the same way that Wolfenstein 3D was done. Now, if you haven't already watched the episode on Killing Time, definitely check out the playlist, but you could get textures on the floor and ceiling in 3DO, so it's hard to say whether or not this was done from a design perspective, trying to emulate the look and feel of Wolfenstein 3D, or if they were having some issues with the frame rate once they put textures on the floor and ceiling. I don't have an answer to it, but you can leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. And sometimes you're going to find an enemy like this, best thing to do is just run around them, because you do not need to shoot any single enemy in this game, but the minute they see you, they will continue to follow you until the end of the map if they have line of sight. We've collected one piece of the medallion, we briefly survived the beastly belfry right here, and we are on to the next level. This game isn't that long, I will be honest about that. You can breeze through it, but honestly, it is worth the time you put into it, and it's great that it doesn't take a massive time commitment. You'll see one of those jump scares right there. It's just a fun game, and it's another example of why owning a 3DO or playing games from the 3DO library is 100% worth it. This is definitely an awesome game for 1993. And I remember when I first got it and played it, I definitely fell in love with it. I showed all my friends because it was the most impressive thing you could see back then. Of course, if you compare the 3DO to what came on the PlayStation 1 or Sega Saturn, this isn't going to hold up to something like Power Slave on the Saturn. But this game came out years before on hardware that on paper was inferior, and it still runs this good, looks this good, and it's this fun. That's what I keep saying when I say that the 3DO has a great library if you know where to look. And the internet's been lying to you this entire time, saying there's nothing to play. It's just such a unique and vibrant game. And as you go further into the game, you see and do new things, you encounter new enemies, and it really makes you want to see what's around the next corner and through the next locked door. And every once in a while you do want to use the map, which is quite good, because some of these levels, just like Wolfenstein 3D, could be very maze-like, but that's nothing to give it critique for. It was how games were designed back then. But the transparencies, and especially the effects on all the different enemies here, the way they have this almost staccato movement, all these frames of animation, it makes them look even creepier, and it does such a good job of looking like movement you would see in a horror movie where things that are alive don't move in any manner that you've seen in real life. I'm going to give you one more taste of the soundtrack, a different track this time, 35 seconds, and I'll be right back. Now imagine it's 1993, you're in your bedroom playing on your little 20-inch Sony, and you're 8 years old. That's where I was when this game came out, and it definitely scared the hell out of me, and I probably lost some sleep to it. Obviously, as the years have gone by, it isn't as scary as it was when I was 8, but this definitely had a big impact in the horror genre for me, and it might be one of the main reasons I do love a good horror first-person shooter. And I particularly love the fact that you can just get lost in the levels and have to refer to a map, because that's how first-person shooters were back in the day. Obviously, they've changed a lot. Most games now, unless they're one of those boomer shooter remakes, are going to be much more linear point A to point B affairs. But a lot of fun in this area and in this game comes from the fact that you need to navigate around, find keys, and continue to progress through the map while actually looking at a physical map to understand where you're supposed to go next. It just gives you a better sense of exploration, and it's basically how all of the first-person shooters were done in the early 90s, and it just works here as well. It's definitely not going to rival Doom. Of course, that came out very shortly after this, but the fact is, you put something like Escape from Monster Manor up against the developers at id Software, of course id's going to come out ahead. They had more experience, they had a bigger team, and they had the head start on development. This didn't take very long to make, and the product that came out of the developers doing this at EA, I think it's just a 10 out of 10 for 1993. Sure, it's not going to be a 10 out of 10 for 2024, but does that really matter? If you're looking for more retro gaming fun to be had in your home, you could definitely do a lot worse than Escape from Monster Manor. So next time you're craving some retro gaming horror goodness, definitely check out Escape from Monster Manor. It's 100% ready to hang out with you. Bye-bye.